this again to match this large square, and we use this topmost corner as the center. We turn yet another circle, and we have yet again another large square in the making. Once again, you extend the sides of this third square all the way out to the next larger circle till it touches the outermost point. Then you extend this side of the square out until it touches the edge of the circle, and you have two more points of contact with which to connect with the diagonal of this third square. You keep connecting the sides and the diagonals, and you see the points manifesting themselves. You see the lines of energy connecting in the lines from point to point through the line of energy. The next square side is also connected to that point, and you see yet a larger square. So you have the primary square, its diagonal is cut in two. This gives rise to the second square. You cut that diagonal, this gives rise to the third square. When you cut the diagonal of the third square, this gives rise to the fourth square. And it grows and grows and grows on into infinity with this same relationship. The root is related to the square root, as the square root is related to the root of the next larger square. It also works backwards. Not only can it increase, but it can decrease in the same relationship from a larger square to a smaller square to a smaller square to a smaller square. It works both directions, with the proportions remaining the same. The relationship between the proportion and progression reminds us of an alchemical axiom that is utterly fascinating. Everything in creation is formed from a fixed, immutable component, that is a proportion, as well as a volatile, mutable component, that is a progression. We can prove that with the volume and increase of the square and its square root. The relationship between the fixed and the volatile, between proportion and progression, as we've just seen with this geometry of the square, is a key to sacred geometry. This is how geometric progression works. Everything which is manifest, whether it's in our beautiful physical world that we live in, or in the world of our mental images and constructions, it belongs to the ever-flowing progressions of constant change. And it's only in the non-manifest realm of principles which is immutable. Our science errs in attempting to attach fixed absolute laws and definitions to the changing world of appearances. The fixed proportions and laws come from the metaphysical world, not in our physical world. We can see these laws manifest as we practice sacred geometry. Here's the fascinating thing we've witnessed. We've witnessed the divisions of unity through the drawing of the square's diagonal. And the side of the original square called its root is given the value of 1, simply because it's the first or the primary unit. The area of this square is also 1 because 1 times 1 is 1. The simple act of drawing the diagonal in the first square is what gave us the rise of 2. And this isn't because we split the first square in half with that diagonal. That's not why it's called 2. But because square 2 is implied in the drawing, since the diagonal of square 1 is the root of square 2. Remember, each side of the square is called its root. You draw the primary square, and then you draw that diagonal. That's the square root of the second square's side. That's why it's the square root of 2. Isn't that fascinating? The area of the square root of 2 is exactly twice the area of the first square. The area of the second square, I should say. So how this diagonal, the question arises, why bother with the diagonal at all? I mean, what's the point of the diagonal? Here's why. Because what we make implicit in our drawings, what we see as being implicit in our drawings, we, through the practice and use of sacred geometry, make the implicit explicit. We manifest the laws, the proportions, the ratios, and the harmony through our meditative drawing from the infinitesimal points out of the energy lines and into the perfect square. Then through its diagonal, which gives rise to the second square, and through its diagonal, which gives rise to the third square, etc. A form is a geometric system, and like any system, biological, chemical, or any other system, it must be seen in the unfolding continuum of its components in their cause-effect relationships. Because we split the diagonal of the first square, it gives rise to the second square. It is a creative act. The movement from implicit to explicit is very similar to that of cause and effect. That's why we study sacred geometry. It is only in the arbitrary mental world that cause and effect can be separated, while in the natural world they are inseparable. A cause is not a cause unless it has an effect. If we carry this logic further, we see that the square surface only exists in a continuous relationship of a cubic volume. The square that we drew earlier through the two circles in the Vesica Piscis is only one side of a cubic volume. A cube has 6 sides. Every square we see is, in contemplative geometry, we are realizing that it is just one side of an entire cube. So when we contemplate the squares, we always attempt to follow the complete movement from the pure abstract two-dimensional world of line, then plane, as it becomes explicit in the actual world of three-dimensional volume, such as this cube here. So to return to our square that we halved by cutting it through the diagonal, the paradoxes that have been revealed in the act of its division by the diagonal is that the first lies in the uncanny coincidence of the two functions of root and diagonal in the geometric movement of the square root of 2. The same line unit is both the root and the diagonal, the paradox of sameness and difference in the same line. That diagonal of square 1 is the square root of the second side of the second square. Sameness yet difference. Complete paradox.